Hey, there's been a lot said about stupid Christians on the internet. And it has been especially an attack against black Christians because the saying is that Christianity is a white man's religion. And so I think we need to delve into why people say it's a white man's religion and let's attack the false premise behind it. Let's start number one. The reason it's not a white man's religion is because it is ultimately it came from a Jewish origin, and Jewish people are not white. So when we talk about Middle Eastern people, now I know that when we look in America, we see Jewish people, and since they've been mixed with Europeans, and a lot of people can be culturally Jewish but not ethnically Jewish, they may look to some people to be European. But the truth of the matter is that if you were to see Jesus, he would look Middle Eastern. He would be a lot darker than your average European. And so when we talk about Christianity being a white religion, it didn't come from whites. It came from a Middle Eastern or an Asian ethnicity. Let's talk about the second thing about why it is not a white religion. It's not a white religion, even though a lot of pictures that you see about Jesus will make him look European. Now, this is just simply an attack. And why did people make Jesus look European? They made him look European because they wanted to identify with him. It really had a lot to do with white supremacy, and I'm not really going to gloss over that fact, but that's simply the case. And a lot of people want to deny this, and so there's this counter movement on the black community where there'll be black Jesuses out there. And ultimately, you could have a Jesus of any color. The only reason that I don't like it is because I don't believe that any of those pictures is how Jesus looked. But the truth of the matter is that Jesus was a Jewish man. Now, some people will say Jesus was not any ethnicity because he's God. Well, that's a lie, because Jesus has a hereditary line. And so when you look at Matthew and you look at Luke, you can see who his parents are and who his whole line is. And that'll kind of tell you how he would look. So those who are saying that Jesus does not have an ethnicity or Jesus belongs to all people, well, there is some truth to that, but it doesn't have anything to do with his ethnicity or how he looked. Why does Jesus belong to all people? It does not have to do with anything with how he looked. It's because what he offers is to all people. So it's similar to like the message of a Gandhi or a message of Martin Luther King. You can identify with that message and not be black or not be Indian in the case of Gandhi because those messages transcend culture. Or the same with Jesus. His message transcends the Jewish culture that he was preaching to. But it's make no lie, it was first aimed at the Jewish people. And that's where it started. Even in the Bible, it says Jew and Greek. And what it simply is saying is this: the message went first to the Jews and then it went to everybody else. So you cannot deny the Jewishness of Jesus, right? You cannot deny the fact that he was what some would consider a rabbi first. Technically, I don't think he would be considered a rabbi, but he was a rabbi first. And so here you got Jesus as a Jew, and that's just something that cannot be denied. Now, there's a third argument that the reason that Christianity was given is to make slaves obedient, and that is true, right? That can't not be denied. The reason that a lot of black people are Christians today is because way back in the day, slave masters gave Bibles to these slaves because they thought it would make them more obedient, because the Bible has verses about slaves obeying their masters. And some Christians have tried to gloss over this fact that the Bible has verses that tell slaves to obey their masters. Now, people, when they say that fact, let's just talk about why that fact is. And people talk about, well, it's hard to defend that. It ain't hard to defend at all. What it simply means is this: as a Christian, you got to serve God no matter what stance you have, no matter what circumstance you find yourself in. You could be king like David, or you could be a slave. At the end of the day, you still have to serve God. Now, Paul talked in his letters about the fact that if you are born a slave, right, you can seek your freedom, and he wanted every man to seek his own freedom, because the truth of the matter is that the state of man is meant to be free. If you look at the way that Adam and Eve were made, there wasn't even a government when man was made. Government wasn't instituted until after the flood. After the flood, when man was killing man, right? And so government was created to curb the excesses of man. But it's a necessary evil. It's not something that we would want. So when we talk about slavery, it is not natural for men to be enslaved. So again, what does the Bible talk about slavery? Well, the Bible doesn't talk about slavery in the sense that American slavery was. When you talk about American slavery, that was an ethnic slavery. There was only a couple other kinds of ethnic slaveries like that throughout the whole history of man. One of them will be the Slavics, where the actual name slave came from, right? If you were seen to be a Slavic person, people will consider that you to be a slave, or most likely to be a slave. But if you look at the Roman Empire, when slavery was involved, when slavery was throughout all society, what happened is a slave didn't have a color because anybody could be a slave. Any Roman could be a slave. Anybody who fell in hard times would have to sell themselves and end up being a slave. The same in Jewish culture, right? But you could buy back your freedom. But it was considered to be a low state, and it's something that happens. Now, people will talk about, well, in modern days, we don't have slavery. Come on, what is a student loan? Come on, what is a mortgage? Some people are literally tied to their jobs and they can't leave. Credit lines, all kind of things. We can say it in nice terms, but at the end of the day, if your life's labor is going to pay somebody else, come on now. You could dress it up in nicer terms, but the truth of the matter is the principles of what slavery is still exist to this day. And it is not something that is always tied to race. It has always been tied to financial status. Now, American slavery went past that and tried to make people slaves just based on their hereditary and make them always be a slave. So once a slave, always a slave. All your kids are slaves. And that damaged American society badly. And it damaged the black image badly. And it's something that is going to be very hard for people to recover from, even to this day. I'm not one who's going to make excuses for black people because of slavery. That's not what I'm about. But the truth of the matter is that when you can think about a slave and you could think of a color, that's bad, right? That'd be like if you could think of a whore and you automatically think of a certain race. That would be bad for that race's women. So it's the same with black people. That cultural image is bad. Now, getting back to the larger point, what does the Bible talk about slavery? Slave masters gave Bibles to slaves because they thought it would make them better slaves. But at the end of the day, what their purpose of were given it does not in any way subvert the truth of the gospel itself. And so that would be no different than if I was a pimp and I taught my prostitutes math because I wanted them to add up my money that I had right. At the end of the day, math is still valid. I may have given them for some suspect reasons, and we can acknowledge that. But math does not get invalidated because of my bad intentions. And the same with Christianity. Christianity was given to slaves to make them more obedient. But it also inspired slaves to fight against slavery. It also inspired them with stories of Moses. And the truth of the matter is there were some slaves who obeyed their slave masters more and traded on other slaves because of the Bible. But there are also slaves who fought against slavery because of the Bible. But at the end of the day, the truth of the Bible is not going to be evaluated properly by looking at the intentions of slave masters who gave it to their slaves. That will not invalidate or substantiate the claims of the Bible. So, hey, just wanted to give an argument about why Christianity is not a white man's religion. It's something that you're going to hear a lot. And then we'll talk about black Hebrew Israelites one day. But that's going to be a wild video. But here's the thing. One of the dumbest religions you ever heard of. And one of the dumbest religions, and it's easy to counter. So we'll talk about that another day.